Hey folks. So I'm going to give us a bit of a update on the Vite situation in Ember today. As Yashka said, most of you probably know who I am, but for anybody who doesn't, my name is Chris Manson. I don't need to read the notes for that one. I am a senior software engineer at Main Matter. I have been using Ember for 13 years this December, which feels like a very long time. I have 2 dogs, 2 kids, and I live here in sunny Dublin. Look at this. Yeah, I have been telling all my coworkers how damp my little island is, and of course it makes a liar out of me. But so what are we going to talk about today? It's always 3 things. We're going to do a little bit of a refresher on what Embroider is, what it's doing, what we've been doing in the Embroider project. I'm going to be walking us through the new Vite app blueprint, and I'm going to do a bit of a demo, which we'll see if that's going to work. I say that we're doing a refresher because I've already talked about this stuff at EmberConf this year. This was a different kind of talk. We went into more detail here, including like a 5-minute crash course on how roll-up plugins work, and that's useful if you want to think about how Vite works and how Embroider works. So I highly recommend having a look at this. I'm not even sure if you can read which letters they are, so I put a QR code up for you. But for anybody who hasn't seen that talk, I'm going to go through what the situation is and what we're trying to do as quickly as I can. Right, so the default experience right now is that we use Ember CLI to build our apps. And if you're using Ember Auto Import, you have a little bit of Webpack sprinkled in, but the majority of your app building experience for the default experience is using Ember CLI that uses broccoli trees to put everything together. And what I mean by the default experience is when you run Ember new, you get this. But we don't want that default experience. We want something a little bit better. You can opt into using Embroider. Well, you can opt into using the stable version of Embroider by just adding a little -- embroider to your Ember new command, which hands over more of the work to Webpack at the moment. And this is an opt-in because there are a few too many compromises in this world, and we weren't ready to swap every Ember developer over to like the next time you update, you're going to have to use Embroider. So what is our solution? How do we get around these compromises? Well, our solution is Vite. We have been working really, really hard for the last year getting Embroider ready to have Vite be able to build your app. And when I say really, really hard, I mean it. This is the pull request that if we merge this, the next version of Embroider will actually be released. And you can see all these versions down here, all these majors. Every single package in the mono repo is being bumped to a major. If I have a clicker here, I can do this. Does it work? It does. And these are all the pull requests that are going into that next release. There has been an awful lot of work. So there's been an awful lot of work, a lot of contributions, but it's not just about people who have been doing the code contributions. A lot of this work has to be, if I push this here, there we go. We have to thank the Embroider Initiative and all of the backers. Brilliant, yes. What we were able to do in the last year would have been impossible if it wasn't for all of these companies, and one individual as well who is in this room, so go and thank him. This allowed myself and another developer in Main Matter Marina's here, to work on Embroider full-time and contribute to that massive list of pull requests. And that led us to, earlier this year, we built the Vite app blueprint, and I announced this at EmberConf. And this is just a blueprint that you can, well, first of all, this existed out of frustrations of conversations that I've had with people in this room where I gave a demonstration on how to use Vite with Ember, and within 2 days, maybe a week of that demonstration, all of my instructions were wrong. So the Vite app blueprint is something that you can run now, and you can use Ember CLI update to get the latest version of it. And that's especially useful at the moment, because if you look at this is all of the changes, the new releases of the Vite app blueprint since the start of this month. It has been updated 5 times this month, and actually this screenshot is out of date because Ed has been merging too many things. And it's not a big deal because we implemented a CI thing that would message us to tell us that it's broken, but it's still funny that we have to deal with this. But there's a reason why there's this mad pace right now. We have done all of this work in the Embroider initiative to get Ember working with Vite, and the point was to try and get to know all of the changes that we needed to make in the blueprint. And why do we want to do that? Why do we want to push on this demo blueprint? Because we want this to be the default experience for every Ember developer. And what we're seeing here is the boulder rolling down the hill. This is the dominoes falling. This is all the work that we've put in over the last year, being represented as little changes, delete this, delete that. And what I mean by delete this and delete that, in those releases, there was a hidden one in here, which is disabling the app rewriting. This is the big change that we've been waiting for. This is the thing that really unlocks Vite being able to look at an Ember app and really understand it in the way that Vite needs to. This is the point at which the Embroider initiative, or the work that we're doing on Embroider, switches from being research and development to being cleanup and getting it ready for everybody. If anybody doesn't fully understand what this means, we do have a little refresher here. This is kind of a rough overview of what Embroider is doing. We have 3 stages. Stage 1, convert all your add-ons, take all your V1 add-ons, your classic add-ons, upgrade them to V2, convert your app code, and then pass it on to the bundler, so Vite. This entire stage in the middle is essentially gone away. We don't point Vite at a rewritten app anymore. We point Vite directly at your code, which is pretty cool. So, if that doesn't feel like a victory lap, that's kind of what I was going for. This is... We've achieved a lot, but let's have a look at what that actually looks like. This is like a quick screenshot of all of the files that are actually different between the default experience, like Ember New, and the actual Vite app blueprint. It's not a long list, so we can go through most of them. But as we go through them, we can talk about the philosophical difference between the old way and the new way. So, first file. This is a very small file. This is a brand new file in the blueprint, app config environment. So, hands up who has ever imported from your app name /config/environment in your Ember app. I expect 100% of the hands to go up. Who knew that file, that module, never existed? It's entirely fake. What actually happens in Ember CLI is we have a config environment file, but that generates an object for you. That object gets embedded into the index.html as a meta tag. Then Ember CLI made some mad file somewhere that loaded that from the meta, and that is what it would return to you from that object. So what you're seeing here is the implicit becoming explicit. That function does exactly that. You can see this in your file. If you import from your app name /config environment, that means this path, and you can follow and see where this load config from meta and see what it's doing. That was totally hidden from you before. So keep that in mind. That's one of the key things that the difference is actually talking about. So let's move on. The next thing, the big thing, the index.html, this is your entry point. There's quite a few things going on here. You can see up the top there that we have no more root URL. Root URL has gone away as a concept. That is not our concern anymore. That's something that if you want what root URL used to give you, it's something that you give to Vite. It's Vite's job now. Like, we're probably going to have some docs about it in an upgrade guide, but most likely those docs are going to point at the Vite documentation. The other thing that's interesting to look at is we used to have this assets vendor CSS, but now you have this weird embroider core vendor CSS. The assets vendor CSS used to be auto-generated by your Ember CLI build, but we don't do that anymore because we don't rewrite your app. We have to inject code that Ember CLI wants to give you or your Ember app wants to give you by implementing virtual files. So Embroider and Vite know when they see something like this, that's essentially a magic string that it knows how to give the answer to. We're probably going to change this Embroider core to Embroider/virtual, so it gives you an extra hint that it's a virtual file. Same is true for the vendor.js, which is down here somewhere. But this one is the really interesting one. So you see here we have default experience.js. In your default experience, you have your appname.js, which is your entry point. That's where all of your discovered files go. That's where there was a little bit of a snippet for app boot that used to go at the bottom, and there was all this config, like, do you want app boot to happen by default, and it would inject it or not inject it. That was all implicit. This is all explicit. We now import your application, we import the config that we saw a second ago, and then we create the application. This is essentially making your app boot explicit. But we still need to have auto discovery of files. How do we do that? Well, let's look into our app.js file. So you can see we've got another little virtual compat modules that we import. And that is essentially just an object where all the keys are the name of that object as you would see in your AMD loader right now. And the value is the actual module. Well, we import that and we just loop over it and we define them with window.define, which is AMD. So we're in the process of removing this, and I feel like there might be an update later in this conference about this, but the idea is that we're going to take this compat modules and pass it directly into the Ember resolver so that we don't need to rely on AMD anymore. So that's another piece that's going away. But this whole thing used to be implicit and now it's explicit, and you can see exactly what it is. And so much so that you can write a little debugger there, literally type in debugger, run it in your app, and see what all of your compat modules are. You can see what you're relying on the compat system in Ember for, which is pretty cool. So moving on, this one's interesting as well. So similar stuff, this is our test index HTML. There's a bunch of virtual files up here. But the really interesting one is that this is like a test entry point. This test entry point has gone away. We now essentially explode this test entry point straight into script tags in your index HTML. So we import Ember testing, we import a function that will start QUnit, that's essentially QUnit start there, imported from test helper. Then we do load all of your test files, and then we start QUnit. So this used to be a really complex mess of timing where your app needed to not boot, but then we load all of your files, and then we had to start QUnit at the right time. But now it's all explicit. You can see exactly what's happening. And it's also very fun to use the import meta glob to load all the files from a particular folder. This does all the watch files and stuff for you too, which is pretty cool. And you can look inside the test helper. We used to have all of the same implementation, but now we encapsulate it in a little function that was the function that we called in the past. So that is a bit of a whirlwind tour of what the new blueprint looks like. I skipped over a few of the files, but if you follow along in the blueprint, the V2 app blueprint RFC, which Preston opened a while ago, we're going to update it now that we're at the point where the blueprint is very close to where we want it to be. And we're going to go through in probably excruciating detail of all of the changes, every line that's different, and why we're doing those things. So do follow along and subscribe to it on GitHub. So, who wants a demo? Okay, let's pray to the demo gods. I'm going to just mirror. Can we still see? Where's my other window? Has it gone somewhere? Because it's full screen. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, cool. So in a true, here's one I prepared earlier. Let's just double check that it's still running. It is. Oh, everything's on the wrong screen, but let's fix that so that I don't have to worry about it later. Okay, so this is essentially our Ember API docs. I opened a pull request to demo this at Ember Europe like a few months ago at this stage. What is even time? And it was just using the Vite app blueprint at the time, and I re-upped that same pull request to do it without the app rewriting now. So this is like a fully functional implementation. I can refresh it. You can have a look that it's actually loading. It's actually doing some stuff. Like all the functionality looks exactly the same. I'm not going to open the live one because I didn't preload it and it's not in my cache. So I'm not going to test the Wi-Fi. In fact, I'm not even connected to Wi-Fi here. But the key thing about this demo is we want to see what it's like to actually reload this. I'm going to put this maybe here. I'm going to put this here. There's a reason why I need to make sure these are on the same page, because if I uncomment that and save it, the speed of reload for a full non-trivial app in Vite is incredible. So when we talked about instantaneous rebuilds, this is what we meant. And there's a reason why it's doing that. So if you refresh the page, you can see, I'm going to maybe make this a bit better, but you can see that actually there's a whole bunch of JavaScript files here. Can people see that? Yeah. So these are, some of them are, well, this is interesting. We use Shijiki, I don't know which one exactly it is. These are all the language files that define how to do like highlighting. We should make that smaller. We don't need to have all of those. But if you look in here, you can see things that are like class.js. This is like the actual template, actual JavaScript for this class. This is the route that we're in. Each of the modules that your app needs are all being requested one at a time. And that's really useful. Excuse me for my notes for a second, because I just want to steal this. Don't mind me. If we filter this by larger than, oh, not 100, larger than 1 status code 200, that gives us anything that didn't hit the cache in your browser. And if we go in here, we change this again, and we save it, and we see the load, you can see that because of Vite, I'm going to make this a bit bigger and more central, because of Vite knowing the module graph, it knows that our app is referenced by index. If you walk backwards or walk forward, it's like index references the app references our entry point, which has all those modules that I talked about. That entry point references class.hps, and those are the only 4 JavaScript files that needed to be rebuilt and resent to the browser during dev mode. This is what it has all been about. And I thought this would be a really good time to end the demo, because it's pretty cool. But I decided to go one further. So the second thing that's good about using Vite, using standardized tools, is that we're not just getting instantaneous rebuilds. We get to start using other people's code instead of our own code in the Ember community. I literally searched for SVG Sprite Vite, and I found this, which is like a remix thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's a very well downloaded Vite plugin that does SVG sprites. And I was like, screw it, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So I've already installed this. I'm not running an npm install live. And I dropped in this little svg test.ggs. Interestingly, because I'm using Embroider and Vite, I didn't need to set up anything for GGS to just work. So I just created this file. It just worked. I followed the example that they gave. So we import link component from primer octacons. And then, of course, this is like React stuff or something. Is this React? I don't even know what I'm looking at. So I did it in the Ember way, which is just use HTML, just put SVG, and I ran that. So if we go in here, I have a little SVG test, and it's dutifully reloading in here. Boop, boop, boop. Did it not work? There. Oh, nah. This is great. It didn't work because I didn't turn on the plugin. I knew there was a second step to that demo. And look, you import the plugin. Oh, it's not being used right now. Into your Vite config. You add it to your plugins array. And Vite is interesting. Oh, it sometimes notices. Yeah, if you change your Vite config, it notices that you need to restart the server. And it just does that for you. Server restarted. Please work. Please work. Come on. Ah, yes. And the interesting thing about that is that these things they are just SVGs that are referencing the sprite. And the sprite, I really wanted to be able to see these things, but I guess they're no fill, and then you have to do that later or something. I don't know exactly how sprites work. This is one file with the two sprites that we're using, and if we stop using one of those sprites, let's comment out this and comment out, no. We leave the accessibility in. We'll take out the link. We'll take out the link. We'll see that even this sprite SVG is going to reload eventually. Maybe I have to restart the server for this. It's a random plugin that's been downloaded 50 times last week. I don't know if they've got reload capability. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. And now the sprite only has one item in it. So it only populates the sprite with the SVGs that are actually being used by your app. And that's nothing to do with Ember. That's some rando who made a Vite plugin for their remix thing. And that is really what this whole effort has unlocked. Okay, that's the demo. So what's next? I was hinting so many times at the next effort is to make this default. We got to the point where Ember and Vite are things that work together. We're almost there and getting it absolutely perfect, exactly the way we want it, with auto file watching and all this sort of stuff working the way we want it for this version. But we have a few more things to do. We have to do the RFC. We have to implement the RFC. There's a few of the things that need to go into Ember before we can make that the default. And with the success of the Embroider initiative, we have decided to launch the Ember initiative. And it says it there in the header on the website that this is a permanent effort to advance the Ember ecosystem. This is something where we've had so much success in the Embroider initiative that we want to keep that train running. And if you are interested in helping out, then talk to me, talk to Marco. Marco's here. He's better to talk to about this stuff. And it just changes it from me being able to use the generous 20% time to do 1 day a week to be able to make this a 5-day-a-week thing that we can just make Ember better for everybody. And that is it. This is how you can find me.